My Uncle Frank shook my hand firmly. "Good of you to come, James," he said, his voice steady despite his condition. Frank was the last relative I had left, and he knew the end was near. Earlier, his doctor had pulled me aside in the lobby to deliver the inevitable news. Frank had always been a constant figure in my life, more than just my mother Clara's brother. He had been a mentor and, in many ways, a father figure. He was the kind of man who spoke plainly and lived by a strong moral code, something I always respected. When my mother passed 2 years ago, Frank had stood beside me at her grave, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "She lived well, son. That's what matters," he had said. Now it was Frank's turn to leave, and he faced it with the same unshakable demeanor I had come to expect from him. Since he fell ill, I visited him every day without fail. Today, though, his doctor said it was urgent, so I arrived earlier than planned. When I stepped into his room, Frank gestured for me to sit. "We need to talk about the egg money," he began, his tone deliberate and serious. The egg money had always been a family story, passed down like folklore. It started with my great-grandfather James, the man I was named after. His father was a respected lawyer, but James wanted no part of that life. Instead, he secretly raised chickens on their estate, selling the eggs and stashing away the profits. His father found it disgraceful, an insult to their well-off reputation. When James turned 20, his father gave him an ultimatum: give up farming and pursue law, or he'd be cut off entirely. What his father didn't realize was that James had already saved enough money from his egg fund to walk away. He bought a farm, started his own life, and became a success on his own terms. Eventually, his success earned him his father's respect, but James never abandoned the idea of setting money aside for the future. He turned the egg fund into a family trust, passing it down as a legacy. Frank inherited the fund from my grandfather. He lived simply, never married, and never made a big show of his wealth. Anytime money was tight in the family, he and my mother would joke, "Let's break into the egg fund," and share a laugh. For years, I assumed it was just a running gag. "James," Frank said, pulling me from my thoughts, "I know you don't care about the money, but you need to listen. You're marrying Megan next month, and there's something about her that doesn't sit right with me. She's ambitious, sure, but there's a ruthlessness in her I can't ignore. You need to be careful." I didn't interrupt. Frank wasn't one to mince words. "The documents for the Harrison Family Trust are on my desk at home. Promise me you won't tell Megan about them. Not until you've been married at least 5 years and you're sure about her. I need your word on this, James." "All right, Uncle. I'll keep it to myself," I replied without hesitation. I respected Frank's instincts too much to argue. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just his protective nature, but I would later realize how right he was to warn me. Frank passed away later that day. He went peacefully, just as he'd lived, with quiet dignity and no theatrics. 3 days later, I buried him in the family plot alongside my parents and grandparents. Generations of Harrisons rested there, and now Frank joined them. Megan, my fiancée, didn't attend the funeral. She had more pressing matters, as she put it, final exams for her 4th year of medical school. Her absence didn't surprise me. Megan was the type to put her ambitions above all else, even basic decency. She and Frank had never gotten along, and I often suspected she resented his straightforward, no-nonsense personality. Megan was determined to be a doctor, a goal she pursued with relentless focus. While I admired her work ethic, it often came at the expense of her relationships. She was sharp and undeniably attractive, standing at 5 feet 6 inches with striking features. But her cold, calculating demeanor often made her difficult to be around. Megan had shoulder-length blonde hair and the physique of someone who might have been a cheerleader in high school, but her personality was far more analytical, like that of a computer programmer. Though she wasn't naturally gifted in math, that's how we ended up meeting in college. I was tutoring calculus and Megan was assigned to me. She needed top grades to get into medical school, so simply passing calculus wasn't enough. She had to excel. Initially, we connected over our shared drive for achievement. My ambition was to teach and make a difference, and Megan was laser-focused on becoming a surgeon. Neither of us had much dating experience, so what started as study sessions eventually turned into coffee shop visits, and soon enough, we were spending more and more time together. Megan wasn't particularly warm or affectionate, but I wasn't looking for that. I appreciated her determination, even if it bordered on obsession. The night I received the news of my mother's death, I had been with Megan. The next day, I asked her to marry me, not out of grief, but because it seemed like the logical step. Megan agreed, though we decided to delay the wedding until I graduated and found stable work as a teacher. A week after Frank's funeral, I opened the drawer of his desk and found what he had left for me. There, perfectly organized, were the records of the Harrison Family Trust, alongside his last will and testament. The trust held nearly $7 million, making me the sole beneficiary. Megan and I had been living together for years while she worked through medical school, and I supported us on my modest teacher's salary. The wedding was set for the following month. Megan had a long road ahead, with plans to specialize in surgery, and I was prepared to carry the financial weight in the meantime. But the inheritance changed everything, or at least it would have if Megan knew about it. I had promised Frank to keep the trust a secret until I was certain of her, and I intended to honor that promise. I took the trust papers to a reputable investment firm in Manhattan. If we needed money, I would discreetly access the funds, always presenting it as though I had borrowed and struggled to repay the amounts. In a way, that wasn't far from the truth. I saw the egg money as a sacred family trust meant to be preserved and handed down to future generations. Megan's parents threw us a lavish wedding, but I declined their offer to pay for a honeymoon. Instead, I took Megan to a high-end Caribbean resort, explaining that Frank had left me a small bequest specifically for that purpose. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. In the early years of our marriage, Megan was consumed with her studies, and I was busy with my teaching career. I worked as a second-grade teacher in a respected school district. While I could have taught high school math or pursued an advanced degree, I felt that shaping young minds at an early age was where I could make the most impact. Megan didn't understand my passion for teaching children and often dismissed it as a waste of my potential. But at first, she didn't interfere. As time went on, I saw less and less of Megan. Her medical internship consumed nearly all her waking hours, and when she wasn't at the hospital, she was studying or networking with her colleagues. I didn't complain. I knew she was building toward her career, but the distance between us grew with every passing day. When her internship ended, I expected things to improve, but instead, she dove headfirst into her residency. 5 years of marriage flew by in what felt like a blur, and it was time to decide whether to honor Frank's trust by sharing the truth with Megan. Yet, something held me back. Despite my earlier optimism, I couldn't shake the feeling that Megan viewed everything in her life, including me, as a stepping stone toward her next goal. By the time Megan finished her residency and began working as a surgeon, her income had skyrocketed. She was now earning far more than I ever could as a teacher. With her newfound wealth, Megan became fixated on upgrading our lifestyle. She insisted we buy a large, expensive home in an affluent neighborhood, claiming, "I'm a surgeon, and this is the kind of house that reflects my status." Her reasoning rubbed me the wrong way, but I went along with it, not because I wanted the house, but because it wasn't worth the argument. Megan was relentless when it came to getting what she wanted, and I knew when to pick my battles. Still, her attitude made it clear that our priorities were no longer aligned. While I focused on building a stable, meaningful life, Megan was chasing an image, one that I wasn't sure I wanted to be a part of. Megan insisted on buying a McMansion, a massive house crammed onto a lot that barely accommodated it. The interior was over-designed, with too much wasted space, but Megan was fixated on the prestige it would bring. The house came with a freestanding 3-car garage, which Megan quickly filled with her new luxury car and an all-terrain SUV. My reliable Subaru was relegated to the 3rd spot, squeezed in as if it didn't belong. When I suggested it was time to consider starting a family, Megan brushed it off without hesitation. "We just got our freedom," she argued. "Having kids now would tie us down. We should enjoy our success first." Her idea of enjoying success, however, didn't include me. I spent most evenings and weekends alone in that oversized house while she claimed to be working. Our neighborhood was all about appearances, picture-perfect houses with neighbors who hardly spoke to each other. Megan's late nights and weekend shifts became more frequent, but I couldn't shake the suspicion that not all of her time was spent at the hospital. Out of sheer boredom, I began volunteering at a local daycare on weekends. The children were a joy to work with and gave me a sense of purpose that was lacking at home. In the evenings, I found myself spending time in online forums related to education, discussing the latest trends and challenges in the field. One night, in an education-focused chat room, a new user with the handle Hermes posed an unusual question. Does anyone know about an educational program called Doctrina? I'd be interested in your thoughts. The program he mentioned was a hot topic in education circles. Doctrina was a high-tech software suite designed for elementary schools, but my school had been a test site for it, and I knew its flaws firsthand. Most of the administrators in the chat room were enthusiastic about its potential, but I chimed in with a more realistic view. Doctrina requires a huge investment in hardware, I explained. Most public schools can't afford it, and even elite private schools might question whether it's worth the cost. If parents are already paying a fortune for tuition, they expect their kids to be taught by educators, not machines. Hermes responded with a question about homeschooling, and our conversation quickly shifted to private chat. Over the next 4 hours, we debated the merits and limitations of Doctrina and discussed broader issues in education. When we finally signed off, it was after 2 a.m., and Megan still wasn't home. She stumbled into the bedroom at around 3 a.m., clearly drunk. I pretended to be asleep as she tossed her clothes into the hamper and headed for the bathroom. Something didn't add up. Allegedly, she was working the 4 p.m. to midnight shift, but her behavior told a different story. The next morning, before leaving for work, I checked the hamper. Her clothes from the night before were not what you'd wear to a hospital. Most damning was the expensive lingerie she had worn, stained in a way that left no room for doubt. Whatever faith I had left in Megan evaporated on the spot. For the next 2 weeks, I carefully observed her while considering my next move. Confronting her was an option, but I wanted more clarity before acting. Was there a single man involved, or were there others? Could this be salvaged, or was it already beyond repair? Counseling was a possibility, but trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. I wasn't about to make a rash decision without first weighing all my options. In the midst of my private turmoil, one of my students, Jeffrey Anderson, caught my attention. He was a bright boy, but he struggled with reading and pronunciation. Suspecting a learning disability, I recommended resources to his parents during a parent-teacher meeting. The Andersons had the means to seek help, and I urged them to pursue further testing. Sure enough, Jeffrey was diagnosed with a condition that required intervention. Helping Jeffrey gave me a sense of focus and clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. At the end of one meeting, his mother hugged me and said, "You're a blessing to this school." Her words stayed with me. While my marriage was falling apart, my work remained meaningful. I wasn't going to let Megan's choices derail my purpose or my integrity. You're a wonderful man. Your wife is lucky to have you, though she doesn't seem to realize it, Mrs. Anderson said, her words laced with a knowing tone. She was the head nursing supervisor at Megan's hospital, and her husband, Jack, was a prominent attorney. Jack shook my hand firmly. "Silas, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," he added. Their kind words stayed with me as I left that evening. Professionally, I felt at the top of my game. Personally, the cracks in my marriage were glaring, but I wasn't about to let Megan's decisions define my future. That night, I received 2 emails. The first was from Megan, predictably informing me she'd be working late again. The second was from Hermes, the online acquaintance I had spoken with about educational trends. His message was brief but intriguing. "Log on tonight. Private chat. Got something for you." I logged into the discussion board around 11 p.m., and Hermes was waiting. "Hey, Teach," he began. "I owe you big time. That tip you gave me about Doctrina saved me a fortune." "Glad to help," I replied. Hermes explained that he was an investor, starting off as a day trader with family money, but almost losing it all early on. "I got lucky," he admitted. "I partnered with a guy who runs a fund investing in startups. It's risky, but the payoffs can be huge. That Doctrina deal? He was all in on it until I clued him in. He's grateful for the heads up you gave me." "Happy to help," I said again, intrigued by where this was going. "Well," Hermes continued, "my guy and I have a new deal. It's high risk, but if you're interested, I can let you in on part of my buy-in. Minimum's $500K, but I can split a piece with you if you want to invest smaller. Something about the timing and my state of mind pushed me to consider it. I'll take a full share, I typed, surprising even myself. Seriously? You're a teacher, Hermes replied, clearly skeptical. I've got what I call egg money, I responded. Egg money, he laughed. Who knew? Okay, here's the deal. The company is called Odo, but we're investing in their spinoff. It's called Twitter. Yeah, I know, silly name. It did sound ridiculous, and had Hermes explained the concept in detail, I likely would have passed. But I was riding a high from my recent professional success, and if I was honest, a low from the growing realization that Megan's nights working late were anything but professional. I wired the money the next day. 5 years later, that silly idea paid off in ways I could never have imagined. By then, I had made several investments with Hermes, not all of which succeeded, but the ones that did more than made up for the losses. The egg money, which I had always considered a legacy to protect, had grown into something beyond my wildest expectations. And yet, not everything had improved. I found myself at a hospital fundraiser, standing in a rented ballroom filled with doctors and high-profile donors. Megan had insisted I attend, but it was clear from the moment we arrived that she didn't want to be seen with me. I was in a simple blue suit, appropriate but hardly flashy, and I could sense her disdain. Megan, meanwhile, was dressed to turn heads, clinging to the arm of a young surgeon who was unmistakably her latest fling. Soon the music began, and Megan was in his arms, dancing far too closely for it to be innocent. I watched from across the room, indifferent to the display. Divorce was inevitable, and I was already planning my exit. The real challenge wasn't the emotional toll. It was the logistical one. My wealth, carefully concealed over the years, would almost certainly come to light in a divorce. The prospect of sharing it with Megan, after everything she had done, was a bitter pill to swallow. Mr. Harrison, a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Mrs. Anderson smiling warmly as she took my arm. Hello, Mary, I said. Congratulations on your promotion to head of nursing. Thank you, she replied. I'd like to introduce you to a few people. She led me to a small group of her colleagues. You know my husband, Jack, of course. This is Leslie Dumont, our hospital president, and her husband, Arthur. And this is Donna Miller. Before Mary could finish, Donna interrupted with a grin. Oh, Silas and I are already acquainted, she said. He volunteers at the daycare I use. I've probably imposed on him more times than I should, being late for pickups. Donna was a short woman with a round figure. Not slim, but with a warmth that made her approachable. Her smile was genuine, and her words were kind, unlike the superficial exchanges I'd grown used to with Megan and her social circle. Well, Mary said, clearly pleased. It's a small world, isn't it? I nodded, feeling something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of belonging. While Megan flitted from one distraction to the next, I was building something real, not just wealth, but a network of people who valued me for who I was. The first time I saw Donna, I thought she looked like something out of an old fantasy drawing, soft and captivating, with silky black hair cropped short to frame her round, beautiful face. She was warm and approachable in a way that seemed almost otherworldly in my world of superficiality and pretense. Donna had 2 children enrolled at the daycare where I volunteered. She was a registered nurse working weekends to avoid night shifts, and with her husband having passed away 2 years earlier, she managed everything on her own. She lived a life that couldn't have been more different from mine. While I dealt with Megan's carefully curated image and the coldness of our marriage, Donna radiated authenticity and warmth. The daycare where she left her kids wasn't typical for weekends. It was only operational thanks to a grant from an oddly named benefactor, the OAM Foundation. The center was a lifeline for people like Donna, who needed reliable care to keep their lives running. It's never an imposition to help a beautiful woman in need, I said one evening when Donna apologized for being late. The group around us, including Mary Anderson and the hospital president Leslie Dumont, chuckled at my light-hearted tone. Donna, however, offered a shy, genuine smile that spoke of gratitude rather than self-importance. Well put, Jack Anderson chimed in. And obviously true, coming from one of the best educators I know, a man committed to excellence. I tried to wave off the compliment, but Mary wasn't about to let me. She launched into a story about how I had identified Jeffy Anderson's learning challenges and helped the family secure the resources they needed to turn things around. Jeffrey's heading into middle school next year, and he's at the top of his class. Thanks to this man, Mary said, leaning in to give me a quick hug. Excellence in one's profession is something we all aspire to, but few of us achieve, Arthur Dumont remarked. His wife added pointedly, though some let their baser instincts lead them astray. She shot a glance across the room, where Megan was on the dance floor, draped over her latest lover like a trophy. I wasn't surprised to learn that Megan's behavior wasn't as secret as I had assumed. Her arrogance, it seemed, had led her to believe no one would notice, or perhaps that no one cared. At that moment, Donna stepped in. "I'm going to be bold and ask this excellent gentleman to dance," she said, her tone playful but genuine. I couldn't help but smile. "It will be my pleasure," I replied. As I held Donna in my arms, something about her felt right. She wasn't just filling the space in my arms. She was filling a void I hadn't even realized existed. The warmth of her presence contrasted sharply with the cold detachment that had defined my marriage for years. I drove Donna home that night, leaving Megan to find her own way back to the house we nominally shared. Donna lived in a modest saltbox house on a quiet street. She invited me in for coffee, and as we sat in her cozy kitchen, I watched her move through the space with ease and care. She checked on her children, who were fast asleep in their beds, before paying the teenage babysitter from a small purse in her pocketbook. It was clear that money was tight, but Donna's home exuded something far more valuable: love and contentment. Over coffee, she opened up about her life. She talked about her childhood, her journey through nursing school, and meeting her husband, Jason. Her voice softened when she spoke of her children, and her words became halting when she recounted the accident that took her husband's life. They had been traveling to visit his elderly mother when a truck jackknifed it. Jason was killed instantly, and Donna was hospitalized for weeks. Her children, safe in the back seat, escaped unscathed, but the settlement from the accident was meager and quickly consumed by the costs of rebuilding their lives. As she spoke, I encouraged her to share everything, knowing that unburdening herself might provide some relief. When she mentioned how much the daycare had helped her, she hesitated. "I'm so grateful to that OEM Foundation," she said. "I should write to them, let them know how much they've done for me and my kids." "I'm sure they already know," I replied, a little uneasy. "Even so," she insisted, "could you help me get their address? I'd really like to thank them." "I'll work on that," I said, glancing at the time. "But it's late, and I should be going." Donna walked me to the door, and as I left, I couldn't help but think about the stark contrast between her life and mine. Donna's world, though filled with challenges, had a simplicity and warmth that mine lacked. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of possibility. "You're wrong," Donna said with a soft laugh as I stood by the door. "It's not late at all, but I'll let you go if you promise to come back. And next time, you have to tell me more about yourself. No more letting me dominate the conversation like I did tonight." "I promise," I replied with a smile. And I meant it. Something about Donna's sincerity and warmth made me want to keep that promise. When I returned home, Megan was waiting for me, her expression sharp and her tone ready for a fight. "Where have you been?" she snapped. "You can't just leave me at a public event without a word. How did you expect me to get home?" "I assumed your boyfriend would drive you," I replied calmly, giving her a look that made it clear I wasn't playing games anymore. Her eyes widened in faux outrage. "How dare you make such an accusation?" "It's not an accusation. It's a fact," I said, keeping my voice even. "Most of your coworkers know about you and Dr. Anthony Vincent. You've been flaunting it for months. Tonight, you didn't even bother to be discreet." "Tony is just a friend," she protested. "Then I assume your friend gave you a ride home?" "If you knew anything, you'd know Tony rides a motorcycle. I wasn't exactly dressed for that." I shook my head, tired of her excuses. "Megan, can't you understand? I just don't care anymore." That seemed to catch her off guard. "Why?" she demanded, her voice rising. I suppose it's because of that woman you left with tonight? Donna Miller? No, I said firmly. She's a widow and a mother, a decent woman, someone you could never understand. Megan hadn't expected me to defend Donna, and as she grabbed the banister to steady herself, I caught a flicker of something on her face. Fear? Regret? Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual anger. You hate me because of my success, she spat as we reached the top of the stairs. I turned to her, more curious than angry. Why would you think that? Because I'm a prominent surgeon, and you're just an unimportant grade school teacher, she sneered. I shook my head in disbelief, walking into the bedroom to prepare for bed. Megan followed, apparently convinced she had landed a critical blow. All this is mine, she continued, gesturing around the room. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, they're all paid for with my earnings. Not the egg money, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. None of the wealth I had quietly built over the years, tens of millions, far outpacing her salary, had come from her. Nor could she claim full credit for everything we owned. My teaching salary, modest as it was, had contributed far more than she realized. But I didn't feel anger, only disappointment. Megan had placed material things above everything else, including the love and trust that should have been the foundation of our marriage. Why, Megan? I asked, turning to face her. Why are you so fixated on material things? She didn't respond. Instead, she stormed into the bathroom, shouting through the locked door, "In a divorce, I'll make sure you don't keep anything." I let her rant. When she finally fell silent, I finished getting ready for bed. By the time I emerged, she was gone. I shrugged and went to sleep, knowing there was no use engaging her any further. The day after Thanksgiving, Megan drove the final nail into our marriage. We had spent the holiday at her parents' house, with Megan putting on her usual performance of being the doting wife. As we sat down for dinner, her mother turned to me with a warm smile. "Silas, when can we expect to see some grandchildren?" I gave her a polite smile. "You'd have to ask your daughter." Megan shot me an angry look before launching into her usual rehearsed speech about how we had to wait until her career was more established. Her mother, as always, responded with her standard advice: "Don't wait too long." The next day, Megan approached me with an announcement. "I'm going away for Christmas break," she said matter-of-factly. "Where do you propose we go?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Not we. I'm going with a friend." "I assume this is a male friend?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That's none of your business," she hissed. "Well, it's not Tony Vincent. I heard he dumped you for a younger model." Her face twisted in fury, and she stormed out of the house without another word. I didn't follow her. Instead, I sat down in the quiet, empty house, thinking about how much my life had changed and how much more it was about to change. After sitting for a while, I made a decision and called a travel agent. "Yes, I can book that trip for you," the woman said. "But I should warn you, it's pricey over Christmas week, and that's without park admission or ride fees." "Just make the reservation," I replied. "But hold the final commitment until the lady says yes." Over the past year, Donna and I had grown close. We had fallen into an easy rhythm, meeting frequently when she came to pick up her children from daycare. Often, I'd take them out to dinner, and her kids, Daryl, 6, and Cheyenne, 4, had grown comfortable around me. They were bright, lively kids, with a bond that reminded me of what a true family should feel like. Daryl was named after his grandfather, and Cheyenne carried the name of Donna's late mother. Despite our closeness, there had been no physical relationship between Donna and me. It wasn't out of some sense of loyalty to Megan. Our marriage was effectively over, but because Donna still carried the pain of losing her husband. I respected her grief and admired the strength it took for her to rebuild her life. It was in this context that I asked Donna if she and her children would join me for a Christmas trip to Disney World. I made sure to ask her in private, out of earshot of the kids. Donna hesitated. "Do you think that's a good idea?" she asked cautiously. "If you're worried about Megan, don't be. She'll be off on vacation with her friend." Donna shook her head. "That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm thinking about the cost." "Don't worry about it," I assured her. "I've set aside money for things like this." When we told the kids, their excitement was contagious. I noticed something else, though. Donna seemed to already know Megan wouldn't be a problem. It was a detail I filed away to revisit later. Before finalizing the trip, I made another call. This one was to a private investigation firm, one with a reputation for thoroughness. "How about I send you a $25,000 deposit?" I asked. "Bill me weekly as you follow her." With Megan being discreetly shadowed, I turned my attention to the end of the school term and the trip. For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to Christmas. We flew to Orlando on Christmas Eve. Traveling with 2 small children was hectic, but their excitement made the effort worthwhile. The suite I had booked had 2 large bedrooms. Donna and the kids took one, while I slept alone in the other. Christmas Day began early, with Daryl and Cheyenne bursting into my room, eager to hit the park. The day was a whirlwind of rides, laughter, and the kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. By late afternoon, we were all worn out. After an early dinner, the kids fell asleep almost as soon as we returned to the suite. I ordered a bottle of wine from room service and poured 2 glasses. Donna joined me on the couch, and for a while, we talked quietly, enjoying the stillness of the evening. Then she excused herself, and I assumed she was heading to bed. When Donna returned, she was wearing a sheer baby doll nightie. I was stunned. "What the hell?" I started to say, but my words faltered as she gave me a playful twirl. "Oh, you don't like it?" she teased, holding the hem of the fabric and swaying slightly. I couldn't find the words to reply. In that moment, she wasn't just beautiful, she was breathtaking. As she finished her twirl, I stood and pulled her into my arms. What happened next defies words. It wasn't just passion, it was something deeper, a connection built on mutual respect, love, and trust. In those hours, we moved beyond the boundaries we had held between us for so long. By the early morning, we lay entwined, content and exhausted. "Why now?" I asked her softly. Donna met my gaze. "Because I love you. I've wanted this for a long time, but I needed to know it was right for both of us. You waited for me, respected me, and my memories of Jason. That's how I knew." A few days later, as we sat at a small cafe, drinking overpriced coffee, I broached the topic that had been on my mind. Donna's children were playing nearby, and she watched them as she spoke, avoiding my eyes. "It's Dr. Sherman," she said quietly, "and it's turning into a bit of a scandal." "Not Thomas Sherman," I said, my stomach sinking. "Chief of Medicine," Donna confirmed, her voice low but steady. "Yes, that Thomas Sherman." I frowned. "But he's married, and happily, I thought. Besides, he has to be at least 20 years older than Megan." Donna nodded, keeping her eyes on her children as they played nearby. "Rumor has it his wife caught him in bed with her. She threw him out, and now he's trying to save face. No one believes he'll last much longer at the hospital." She stopped abruptly, realizing the implications of what she'd just said about Megan. Donna turned to me, her cheeks flushed. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." "Don't worry about it," I said, cutting her off. "You're not saying anything I don't already know. She's exactly what you think she is." Donna looked relieved, though a hint of embarrassment lingered. I didn't want to ruin the moment, so I changed the subject. We finished our coffee and spent the rest of the afternoon with the kids, soaking in the last bit of our trip before heading home. We returned home on New Year's Eve, just in time to watch the ball drop. I didn't go back to my house that night. I stayed with Donna, starting the new year the way I wanted to, in her presence. Megan returned the next afternoon, tanned and glowing from her vacation in the sun. She barely acknowledged me, and I returned the favor. There was no welcome home, no kiss, no pleasantries, just an icy silence that neither of us had any interest in breaking. By February, the tension had reached a boiling point. One day after school, I came home to find Megan sitting stiffly in the living room. Her expression told me everything I needed to know. Her professional world had come crashing down. The fallout from her affair with Thomas Sherman had reached the hospital trustees. Faced with the choice of letting go of their chief of medicine or the surgeon he'd been involved with, they chose Megan. She was out, and the disgrace clearly stung. She wanted sympathy, but I couldn't summon any. Instead, I watched her flail as she tried to rebuild her career. Hospitals in the area, aware of her reputation, wanted nothing to do with her. Eventually, she landed a position as an assistant to a bariatric surgeon at a small hospital. It wasn't the prestigious role she'd grown accustomed to, but it was a job. I waited until she had settled into her new position before bringing up the divorce. By April, I had had enough. Our marriage ended abruptly, not in an explosion of emotions, but with the clinical detachment of two people who had been living separate lives for far too long. Megan fought me, of course, demanding everything she thought she was entitled to. When the news of Donna's pregnancy leaked, hospital gossip travels fast. Megan confronted me at home. She was livid. "Well, you got your little tart pregnant," she accused, her voice dripping with venom. I didn't rise to her bait. "Yes," I replied evenly, "and we're very happy about it." That set her off. She hurled insults at both Donna and me, cursing until her voice was hoarse. When she finally calmed down, I looked at her and said, "This must be humiliating for you, given your notable status. But if you want to minimize the damage, I suggest you divorce me as quickly and quietly as possible." "You bastard," she spat. "You're not even ashamed." I met her glare without flinching. "I have nothing to be ashamed of. I'll claim adultery and name your little mother-to-be as your paramour," she threatened. I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. "No, you won't," I said calmly. "You see, I've had you followed since before Christmas. I have photos, particularly a lovely set of you and Dr. Sherman on a nude beach in St. Martin. If those hit the internet, whatever reputation you have left will be gone in an instant." Her face paled. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I replied. I left her standing there, storming straight to Jack Anderson's office. Jack, who had been expecting me, greeted me with a knowing nod. "She's going to ask for everything," he warned. "She can have it all," I replied, "except the egg money." Jack smiled slightly. "She can't touch the trust. It's irrevocable. And you did well transferring your investment profits into it over time." "Good," I said. "Let's get this done." Donna, however, was less resigned to the idea of me giving up so much. "How can you just let her have everything?" she demanded one evening, pacing her kitchen. "You need to fight this. I'll lend you money for lawyers. I could take out a second mortgage if I have to." I shook my head, reaching for the bottle of champagne I'd brought with me. "Let's not worry about that tonight," I said, pouring us each a glass. "Here, you'll need this." "No," she said firmly, pushing the glass away. "I'm pregnant. We can't afford it." "It's just one glass," I replied gently, easing her into a seat. "And I have no intention of letting this situation hurt us. Trust me, Donna, we're going to be just fine."